Okay, you are listening to Dogs Run Free. My name is Michael Doherty, and today I have the pleasure of talking with Rob Waller, vocalist, guitar player, songwriter for See Hawks in L.A., and one of the absolute best voices in music today. Rob, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you, Michael. It's great to do it. Great to have the time to sit down and talk.
So, just over a week ago on August 1st, See Hawks in L.A. played what was a really special show.
Yeah.
It was outdoors, which somehow is just always fitting for this band. And on the beach at Venice, the sunset while you guys were playing.
It's nice.
And one of the other special things about it was it was the first show in 8 months that you guys played under the name See Hawks in L.A.
Right.
You had done a few shows with Paul Marshall and Victoria Jacobs under the name Rob Waller and Friends, and Rob Waller and his very best friends. But this was the first show as See Hawks in L.A. And I was wondering if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about the decision to go back and...
Sure, yeah. I mean, so, in January, our longtime guitar player, songwriter, founder, visionary of the Hawks, and Victoria's husband, and very dear friend of ours, Paul Lacques, passed away on January 17th after a 17-year battle with cancer, which was just a huge sea change of beyond just music, but of for all of our lives, really like a family member for all of us, I would say, and I sort of couldn't imagine doing, like, I thought we probably weren't going to play anymore. It was like, it just seemed like, well, when Paul, we knew it wasn't a surprise when Paul died, and we knew that, that had been coming for a while. We didn't know when that would happen, but we knew that was probably an outcome that would happen. But I thought we were probably not going to play anymore as the Hawks. And I don't know exactly what Victoria thought, but like it was but a month or so, or maybe some little bit later, and Paul Marshall was like, but we had some shows booked, and we had to kind of that had been booked, well before that, and we had to kind of decide, what are we going to do, like what are we going to do with these shows. And it was really, Paul Marshall was like, we should keep going, and I was just like, we were talking on the phone or something, and we had to talk about like one of these gigs, like what should we do about it? And he was like, we should keep going, we should keep playing. And I was just sort of like, really? Like, we should? Like, I don't know, like, should we? And he's like, well, and we'll talk. He's like, we should talk to Victoria about it and see what she thinks. But if, Victoria wants to do it, or she's up for doing it, and you are and I am, we have all these songs, we should keep playing. And I think that, like, Paul Marshall, he's, Paul's a bit older than me, and he's been through this more than I have. He's lost more close friends than I have. He's lost people who were in bands that he played with, and he was sort of like, he's like, the Dead kept going when Jerry died, like, we should keep going.
Not under that name, though.
Right. That's right. I guess, yeah, the slightly different names.
Yeah.
Right. Dead and Company, and what are some of the other...
Further.
Yeah.
The other ones.
Right. So that's the other question, like, what are you going to call it? If you do keep going and keep playing the songs, is it still going to be the Hawks? And that was another decision. But it started to feel like, we needed to do it, like for each other and for ourselves as part of, the healing process. And, when we first got together to play with each other, just me and Paul and Victoria, it was so tough. It was so tough to, like, and we would cry and we would stop and then we would try again. And, it was like really, really hard. Just because Paul, the missing parts of Paul that you would expect to hear in all of these songs, you
Yeah.
know, singing and playing and just general, presence. But it started to feel better, it started to feel good. And then we started to I remember we played Humboldt, and Humboldt felt really good. And we all felt good. And we're like, that was good, and then it's all just been steps in the process, and then when we had the memorial for Paul in April, we had to get the songs together, to do some of the songs. And, Richie Lawrence, who plays accordion with us, is, one of Paul, has been in many bands with Paul, been friends for 40 plus years. And having Richie there was super helpful, and then Tony Gilkison and Rick Shea, and Dave Zerbel, who's played pedal steel. And so then we kind of expanded the circle a little bit, and then we were rehearsing with those guys, and then we had that show, and then it was okay, and then we got to play in public at the memorial, and fans, yourself were there and other people, and the circle just kind of kept expanding. And it was this feels good, this feels right. Each step, there was sort of the option to be well, I don't think I want to do it after this. We could have done the memorial and then been I think that's probably it, But we didn't feel that way. And then we had this wedding that we had booked a long time ago in May. And that was really helpful because, it was out of town, and it was a private event. And Dan Wistrom came with us for that one. And we had a really good time playing with Dan. And it, it's things just sort of fell into place in ways that were kind of, not totally of our choosing or control, but it was okay, this wedding is up in Northern California, are we gonna go? And that was the first real, show where we were, we had to play, it was a wedding, we had to play 3 hours or something, you have to play a lot of songs at a wedding, and it was that night. We were up in Northern California in the Eastern Sierras. It was a beautiful spot, really nice people, wonderful wedding, and that was the night of that solar storm, and so we got to see the Northern Lights, and so it just sort of felt like it was the right thing, it unfolded in this way. That at each step we sort of made it a little further, made it a little further, made it a little further. And then, deciding to call ourselves See Hawks In L.A., that's the name, and those are the songs. And, that kind of keeps Paul, Paul's not here in terms of playing guitar or singing, but he's all over the place in the songs, in the lyrics, in the construction of the songs, in the writing of the songs, in the, orchestration of the parts. So in its way, playing the songs and being the Hawks, it still summons Paul. Paul's still he's still in the
Yeah, no, I hear that.
And even there are even parts where I know I know what he would say about a certain thing or a certain choice, or he's still casting his vote.
Right.
When certain decisions come up. So anyway, that was kind of a long answer, but that it's unfolded that way, and it's just kind of, we've increasingly felt comfortable with it, and it's increasingly felt good, and so that's how we ended up here. And that show last week, that it was oh, this is gonna be weird. It's on the boardwalk. There's gonna be people walking by. What is that gonna be like? But it turned out really good.
It turned out great. And you mentioned Dan Wistrom, and he played guitar and pedal steel and did harmony vocals at that show. Sort of a daunting task, I think, a role to fill. But he's a great player. People probably know him from his work with Ted Russell Camp, Stephen Casper, and Cowboy Angst. I've seen him play with Funky Jen and a wide variety of folks. Kit Boardman, and he's fantastic. But his playing fits with the spirit of the band.
Thank you. Yeah, I think so too. And it's different,
Yeah.
and the pedal steel definitely is a different, has a different flavor.
Yes.
Than
Yeah.
Paul's lap steel. They're similar instruments, but have a different feeling to them. But he is adventurous, and we need an adventurous player like him, because Paul is so adventurous.
Yeah.
And they're adventurous in different ways. They're different players, but it does have the right spirit.
But I think that's key because he's not really trying to replicate things that happened before, and which I find that's one of the things that I find not irksome, but it's not a great quality of a band when they're trying to basically just recreate something.
Yeah, you can't.
So I love that he's sort of finding his own way. Is he an official member now, or is it like a fluid thing? Or is he different?
We haven't done anything officially, but he's like that. But he's the guy. He's kind of the first call guy right now, for gigs.
Gotcha.
And we can't always get him, because he's busy and works with other people. But then, we've got other people we can call to play, and like Ed Tree, who played with us down, and that was the first time playing with Ed, which was great. And then Rick and Tony are always, going to be guys that, are sort of auxiliary Hawks as well. So there's a few different people, but Dan is definitely, a big part of why we've been able to keep doing this.
Ed Tree played some really great guitar work with you down at the show in Long Beach. Does he not play pedal steel, or he just didn't?
I don't know if Ed
plays
pedal or lap steel. I'm not sure.
Okay. It's interesting because the Hawks have always had great players playing with them, both on in concert and on the albums. Brantley Kearns was a member early on, and John McDuffie played on Humboldt. You mentioned Humboldt.
Yep.
Dave Raven played drums on an album, and then perhaps most notably, Chris Hillman.
Yeah.
Played on California Country. Folks will know Chris Hillman, of course, from the Byrds and Flying Burrito Brothers, and he's also just a really important part in establishing what we call the Southern California sound, which is
for sure
what the Hawks is. How did you end up hooking up with Chris Hillman for that?
So our third record, California Country, was on this record label called Sovereign Artists, which is like 2006 or so.
Sounds right.
And they were sort of a spin-off of, like, it was some people who had left Warner Brothers, and they had a bunch of different acts. They had a bunch of different music. They had Heart was on their record label, and Dee Dee Bridgewater, who's a jazz person, and Chris Hillman and Herb Peterson had a record on this label, and the Hawks were on this label for a time. And I think that's how we started hooking up with Chris. And then we ended up kind of playing with him a few times. We opened for Chris and Herb in Chicago at the Old Town School of Folk Music.
Oh yeah.
Which was really great. And we played with them one time, which was kind of a legendary night. We played with them at the Malibu Civic Center or Community Center or something like that. And Tom Petty was there. And we were having this, and Richie Fury from Poco was there. And he was playing with them too. And there was this just really bad sound situation happening. The sound was just totally messed up. And Richie is really serious Christian, and he wanted to do this prayer, and we were doing this prayer in this circle with Richie, and then Tom Petty did his religion of passing this joint around, and we got to smoke a joint with Tom Petty, and then we played, and the sound was fine. They fixed somehow the combination of the prayer and the joint fixed the sound. And then Tom Petty got up and did a couple songs, solo songs by himself. It was crazy. So that was yeah, 2006, 2007 ish. And that's kind of how we got hooked up with Chris.
I think I first heard you guys on the radio, actually.
Yeah.
There was a program called The Music Never Stops.
Yes.
On KPFK,
Yes.
hosted by Barry Smolin.
Yes.
And my memory is it was a 4-hour show on a Friday.
Yes.
And then it became a 3-hour show on Sunday.
Sunday.
And then eventually it was a 2-hour show on Sunday. But while it was still a 4-hour and a 3-hour, Barry Smolin would dedicate the opening portion of the program before getting to the Grateful Dead concert tapes to local artists in the jam band community and beyond. And that is where I first heard you guys.
Okay.
Because he played your music somewhat regularly.
Yeah.
And then had you guys on.
Yeah.
And I was curious, did radio programs like that, because this was probably 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Did they have a strong effect on sort of growing your audience? And does radio still perform that function at all? Because things have changed.
It's a good question. I mean, I think it still does perform that function, and it's certainly expanded our audience. Particularly, like, I mean, you know, you first heard the Hawks on the radio, you know. Like, you know, many people for many decades discovered music on the radio.
Yeah.
You know, now we have many different ways, like my son, like he knows all, he's 16. He gets all these, I'm always like, what's that you're listening to? What's that you're listening to? What's that you're listening to? And he gets it sort of through mostly, I mean, many different ways, but one of the ways is of course through like suggestions on Spotify or AI suggestions. And, you know, it does a decent job, you know, turning people on to new music. But there's something about it, I think, about a DJ that you trust turning you on to different music. And like you know, there are different places where we've had, you know, really good radio support. Like one place is like Western North Carolina. Like there's WNCW is this amazing radio station that plays us a lot. And we still get booked in festivals and stuff around there. You know, it's like radio play does turn into gigs. And one of the other places that we've had a lot of radio play is on the BBC in Scotland in particular, Northern Ireland, and other places in England. And that's where we always would have, you know, tour and get gigs. And it was because we had good radio support there, you know. And there's some other places too, Vermont and in Texas and, you know, couple other places where we had, you know, just have had regular strong radio support for a long period of time. Yeah. And it worked. Radio still works.
I'm so happy to hear that, honestly. I wasn't sure with Spotify and everything, because you're right. It's hearing a voice of an actual person.
Yes.
Suggesting this is something you should hear.
Yeah.
This is something you should pay attention to.
Yeah.
And I think that makes a big difference. I wanted to talk a little bit about the name.
Yes.
See Hawks in L.A.
Sure.
Unusual name.
Yes.
It's not the only name that's a full sentence. They might be giants, of course.
Right. It's a beautiful day.
It's a beautiful day.
Frankie goes to Hollywood.
Yep. And on the first album, you also have a song called I See Hawks in L.A.
Yes.
So I was just curious, sort of which came first and how the name came about.
So the founding myth of the Hawks is the name is the key part of it. But so it was March 31st, 1999, and Paul's brother Anthony, the original Hawks drummer and one of the founders of the band, it was his 30th birthday, and we were driving to Las Vegas to celebrate his 30th birthday, as people do. And we got off the road and decided to like take a hike. What is the name of the road? It's like on the 15 going to Vegas. Sema Dome Road is the name of it. And there's a rest area there now, and I want to like guerrilla put a Hawks founding plaque there at some point is one of my goals. But we got off at Sema Dome Road. There was not a rest area there at the time. There was like a defunct gas station and a few other things. And it was me, Anthony, Paul, and Paul's girlfriend at the time, whose name is Kathy. So we got off there and we just like drove a while, and then we just decided we were going to take a hike. And so, and it was like late March. It was like still kind of wintry, but it was, I don't know, it was like maybe 5 p.m. or something. We like wandered out into the desert, and like we were just being really goofy and like throwing stuff at each other, and we lost Kathy got separated from us. And somewhere on this hike, one of us said, "I see Hawks in L.A." Like I see Hawks in Los Angeles, and another one of us said we should have a country band called I See Hawks in L.A. And it was just one of those, offhand, like kind of messing around with your friends, kind of thing. But then we all sort of were like, yes, we should. We should have a country band called I See Hawks in L.A. And it really speaks to sort of like the irreverence of the band, as well as this sort of like, we're going to do it. Like people would think that was a crazy band name, but we're going to do it anyway,
Was that song one of the first songs that you guys
wrote?
Well,
yeah. So like we came up with that idea. Then there was like this whole thing that happened where we literally lost Kathy. Kathy got lost. So it started to get dark and it started to rain. And we made it back to the car, and there was no sign of Kathy. And we're like, this is bad. It's getting dark. It's raining. We're in the middle of the desert, and we've lost Paul's girlfriend. So we drove back to the gas station, the defunct gas station where there was a payphone, because I don't think we had cell phones. We must not have had cell phones. And we called the highway patrol, and the highway patrol had found her.
Oh, they had already found her.
They'd already found her. So we had gone one way, she had gone another way. She ended up like back at the interstate, and the highway patrol picked her up, and then they brought her to us. Thankfully, that worked out okay. And she wasn't too mad at Paul. She was pretty mad at Paul. But then, like, we went and we had a good time in Vegas. We came back, and then like Paul wrote the song. And then was like, hey, you should come check out this song. I wrote a song, I See Hawks in L.A., for the band we're going to have, I See Hawks in L.A. And he did. He wrote the song, and we're like, it's great. Then we had to write a bunch more songs, And that was kind of one of the great things about Paul, is like, if you had an idea, like a lot of times people would, like a lot of times you have an idea, it like as songwriting idea or whatever, you take a little note of it, you record a little bit of it, but then maybe you don't ever go back to it, But the thing about Paul is he would be like, okay, here's the idea. I'm going to work on it tonight, and then I'm going to send you something and then you work on it, like, so you just, and as a result, we ended up writing hundreds of songs together and, making 10 albums, and touring for 20 some years. So that's how the name started. But the reason why we liked the name and thought it was appropriate for a country band in Los Angeles is because it's the I See Hawks in L.A. It's like I see wildlife in L.A. Like L.A. is this concrete metropolis with however many millions of people live here now. And people don't often think about this kind of ancient wildlife that's there. Yeah. But it's there. It's all over the place. And there's other stuff too, coyotes, whatever. And we were sort of, at that time in 1999, and our sort of first foray into the Hawks was, we were kind of, and when Brantley was in the band, we were kind of old-timey. Like we did a lot of acoustic shows with violin and vocal harmonies, and Brantley's super old-timey. And it was like, we're doing kind of this old thing in this modern place. Yeah. And it doesn't really make sense, but it exists, and still that's been, kind of the motto for the band. It doesn't really make sense that we're doing this. It doesn't really make sense to have a country band called I See Hawks in L.A. after the year 2000, but we did it and, had a good time, and we proved that it was possible.
Well, and L.A., honestly, L.A. plays a big part in the music. The song I See Hawks in L.A. is far from the only song that mentions Los Angeles specifically.
Many songs,
or elements of Southern California. And so, did that... So that all must have stemmed from that original idea.
I think so. And you know, we have geography plays a big part in a lot of our songs.
Yeah.
And, you know, like one of the things that it has to, you know, like, the ground has a sound is something that I've often said. Like, you make the kind of music that the place around you nurtures. Like, if I lived in New Orleans, I would make a different kind of music. If I lived in Memphis, I would make a different kind of music. If you're paying attention to what the tradition of that place is, there are many traditions in different places, but like you were saying, in Southern California, you know, thinking about Chris Hillman, what the tradition of, we decided to place ourselves within the tradition of Southern Californian country music, which is like the Byrds, the Eagles, Chris Hillman, you know, Flying Burrito Brothers, Merle Haggard, you know, like these are the tributaries of it. Yeah.
Wait, I'm also just curious, just briefly, what were you doing before the Hawks? I actually don't know. Were you in another band?
I was. So, before the Hawks, I was in a band called The Magic of Television with Anthony, who's Paul's brother, and we were in San Francisco. So it's like from 94 to 98, I was in San Francisco. The Magic of Television existed, and we're different. I mean, like, we were more of like kind of a pop punk kind of band, sort of, not really country, but that's how I met Paul.
Yeah.
So I met Paul through Anthony. Like, we were recording up in San Francisco at this place called Hyde Street Studios. Paul was up there with his band Double Knot Spy Car for a gig, and they came, and he came to the studio at Hyde Street, and he played lap steel on, we were doing like, we weren't really a country band, but we were recording Wheels by Graham Parsons that day, and Paul came and played great steel on it, and that was kind of the beginning of, like, that was maybe like 96 or 97, and then it was like, oh, like, Anthony, Paul, and I, like, this was pretty cool, you know, like, we could do a country sounding thing, like, we just did it on this one song, but we could do a whole thing with it.
And then you moved down.
And then I moved down. Yeah, you know, like, kind of the magic of television was kind of ending, and, you know.
Were there any recordings? I mean, did you guys put out any?
There are.
There are? Okay. All right, that's something I gotta dig into then.
So there are, our guitar player, John Abrams, recently, like, during COVID, like, put up all the T-Mott stuff on Spotify.
Okay, good.
So there's
good.
there's actually quite a lot.
A whole new realm I get to dig into.
Yeah.
Nothing makes me happier, honestly.
Yeah.
And then outside of the Hawks, you've recently done a couple of solo albums.
Yeah.
2016's Fancy Free.
Yes.
And then last year's See the Big Man Cry.
Yes.
And on these albums, almost entirely covers.
Right.
I was curious about that decision.
Yeah. So, you know, like, with the Hawks, I'm, you know, like, you know, Paul and I wrote most of the songs. Paul Marshall's also on them. Victoria's also on them. But Paul Lacques and I wrote, you know, 85% of the songs or something like that. And in other bands I've been in, you know, I've written in different combinations. And in 2016, when I was going to do Fancy Free, I just wanted to be the singer. You know, I didn't, like, there's sort of an identity of, you know, when you're singing your own songs, like, it's your identity as the writer. There's, like, your identity as the writer, your identity as the singer, you know, and they're kind of melded together. And the fun thing about doing covers for me was I didn't have to deal with the writing part of it at all, you know, and it's just not me. It's not my song, you know, so it's an interpretation.
Yeah.
And so as a result, it's an experimentation. So it's like I was able to experiment with a bunch of different genres and instrumentation and, you know, just trying out different things. And then when it came around so that was sort of 2016, and I didn't even know if it was really going to be an album at the beginning, I just was kind of recording songs I liked, you know, with different people. And then with See the Big Man Cry, that was produced by Carla Olson and Saul Davis. And they were like, we want to do this. We want to have you do this again, where we choose the songs, you know? So they chose.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
So they chose the songs. I mean, in consultation with me, like there were some songs that they chose that I didn't want to do, and there were some songs that they chose that I didn't want to do that I did.
Which one? I mean,
like that's like I'll Never Dance Again is one of the songs that he like sent to me, and I was just like, I would never do this song. Like I would never think of doing this song. I never would want to do this song. And then I was at Paul Marshall's house, and like on his piano, he has a bunch of. Have you been to Paul's?
Yeah.
And did you go in his like studio room?
No, we actually did an episode of the podcast, but right when we sort of walked in there at his table
in his living room.
Yeah.
He's got sort of a studio room with a piano in it, and he's got a bunch of kind of memorabilia things in there. But he had the 45 of this record on his piano. I was like, why do you have this record on your piano? And he's like, oh yeah, that's Bobby Rydell. You know, it's a great song. That's like he bought that 45, you know, in 1964 or whatever. And
I like that it was out right then.
And it was out. And I was like, Saul and Carla sent me that song. He's like, you should do it. And I'm just like, really? Kind of like when he was like, we should keep doing the Hawks. And I was like, really? Like we should? But I trust Paul Marshall. I trust him 100%. With like, I trust Paul Marshall with anything, with my life, anything. So I'm like, okay, I'll do it. You know, and I really, it turned out great, and I really ended up liking how it turned out. But I think that this is, you know, back to the question, like, why do covers? Because it reveals things about yourself and your, you know, musical identity that you might not have found out about unless you just took a chance and did something weird that's actually like maybe even against your taste.
Well, so Carla Olson, you said produced or co-produced it.
Yeah, she produced it.
She produced the album.
And Saul was like A&R.
Okay, and she also plays guitar and does some backing vocals. And then you had played on her "Have Harmony Will Travel." I think volumes 1 and 3.
I think that's right. Yeah.
But prior to all that, she had appeared on. She played on a track on the See Hawks In L.A. 2010 album or collection. Should have been gold.
Yeah. Yep.
So the relationship is gone for. How did you first hook up with Carla Olson?
So Carla, you know, had and still has a great band called the Textones, you know, that had some hits in the 80s, but like Saul, I met Saul first. Saul is her husband and manager, and Saul I think Saul and I first, like, he saw the Hawks, he really liked the Hawks, and we went to lunch at like Cantor's. This is like maybe like, this has to be more than 20 years ago. Yeah. And, you know, Saul is like, he has ideas, he comes up with stuff, he makes things happen. We've done cool gigs with him, and he, you know, he was like, just kind of figuring out like, oh, what if you guys did this? Have you tried this? You know, you should talk to this person, you know, just kind of stuff like that. And then doing things with Carla. Like we started, like we've done some gigs where the Hawks backed up Carla for her songs. But I can't remember. Like, so like, I think somehow that was a it should have been gold. Like, he was like, you guys got to do a greatest hits record. We're like, really? And then we did it, you know, should have been gold. And he got us on this record label. It's like American Recordings or something. It was American. I can't remember what the name was of it. But, you know, and we did, you know, a couple songs with Carla on that one. She did, what did she do? Les Le Bon Temps Relais. And we did Bossier City, which is like a David Allan Coe song. And Carla and I just really like singing with each other. And Carla, like, she's done a lot of duets in her career, and most famously probably with Gene Clark. Yeah. And so, you know, So Rebellious a Lover is the Gene Clark and Carla Olson record that's just got reissued, and it's a beautiful, amazing record. And, you know, she wanted to sing with me. And so I was like, okay. And it's, you know, it's in the tradition of the place. You know, Gene Clark is, you know, one of the Mount Rushmore Southern California country people, you know, and so it was a good match, and we've you know, hopefully we'll do some more stuff together. I think I'm doing they're doing a Gene Clark birthday show in November at McCabe's that I think I'm going to be doing with them.
Might there be another solo album then too, or
yeah, maybe. I mean, you know, like, I think there will be the kind of next solo album that I want to do. I want to do a gospel record.
Really?
Yeah, and Paul Marshall is producing it.
I love it.
And we've got it ready to go. We've like selected all the songs and written some songs for it as well. We just got to find the time to get it recorded.
I spoke with Paul Marshall on an earlier episode of the podcast, and he said that you guys were determined to finish the album that you guys had started. And I was wondering, I don't know what you're willing to talk about, but like, obviously I'm just curious about what songs are going to be on there, like Ohio, Salvation. Are there any other songs that, both, okay, great.
Both
and then
are
there other songs that you haven't played out that were?
Yeah. Yeah, there are. There's this really strange song we have called Global Pandemic that we recorded with Paul that's kind of tongue-in-cheek song about the global pandemic. We have another one, well, maybe one that I'll play for you called Misery. And what is there's another one, 50 years sober. I think it's a song, or 20 years sober. And we've got, I have to remember the songs because we haven't played them out, but we wrote them and recorded them. So we have like, and then we have other kind of orphan songs that will probably make appearance, things that we recorded but didn't release.
Okay. So will there be? I mean, will for example, will Dan Wistrom be on any of this stuff too?
I think he probably will be.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, once we get to like, we have to kind of go through it all and decide, like, because we have Paul's basic tracks on, you know, 6 or 8 songs.
Oh, great.
And so we'll have that, but then we're gonna, you know, adding other stuff, adding other guitars, adding other solos, adding other songs. So yeah, we're gonna try to get that.
And do you have a title for it?
We don't yet.
Okay.
We don't have a title.
And then are you willing to share a song with us today then?
Sure. I'll play that song, Misery. This is a song Paul and I wrote, you know, in the last year or two, and I think we have performed it a couple times. Sip on the jug of misery. Don't gulp it down like a fool. Just take a little sip, delicate little nip. Just sip your misery, your misery. Follow ghost behind me. Wait for me by the road. No shadows tonight, spirits in the light. I can't fight your victory, your victory. She couldn't say, but she could tell. The demons from the sea, the dust from the street, tangled in the sheets, stars beneath. Your Majesty, Your Majesty. Sip on the jug of misery. Don't gulp it down like a fool. Just take a little sip, delicate little nip. Just sip. Your misery, your misery, your misery, your misery, your misery, your misery, your misery. Your misery, your misery, your misery.
Oh, that was beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you.
Thank you for doing this, for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Hey, I appreciate you doing it and coming over and setting it up and being so prepared and having such good questions. Thank you.
And thank you guys for listening. And please subscribe to my YouTube channel, and I'll be talking to you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.